Hi, I'm Raj, and you are watching the author interview. Books have this magical ability to not only take us on a journey, but also to teach us lessons along the way. And one such story would have to be Tigerfish, written by the phenomenal Tej Rae. Tej Rae, welcome to the author interview. I'm honored to host you.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Of course, and I want to start off with your journey. Where did the story, the passion and yearning to write all begin?
So when I was a kid, I loved to read. I was one of those kids who preferred books to most other things. So my desire to write grew out of that. And a few years ago, when I was really frustrated with the publishing industry, I did ask myself, still want to write. Maybe I'm just writing all this and no one will ever read it. And I reflected on that for a while, and the answer is yes. It's my thing and how I make sense of the world. So for me, the process is an end of itself, and then having a book out there and in readers' hands is just a added bonus.
Absolutely. I'm really glad that you opted to share your story with the world because it truly is a wonderful one. Now, let's shift a little to your book. Why the title and why this story?
Okay, here's the book. I'm so glad you asked about the title. I used to live in Zambia for 10 years, and my husband is Zambian. And so our two kids, who are very much present in the book, are also Zambian. One of the events in the book is fishing, and tigerfish are notoriously one of the hardest fishes to catch. So the main character, Mwati, is this very energetic 10-year-old girl, very stubborn and willful. And towards the beginning of the book, she's out fishing and she has a tigerfish on her hook. And it's really one of the great challenges of her life to actually reel it in. So, in a way, the title works on two levels. She is the tigerfish because
Yeah.
she's so difficult and she's got these sharp teeth and she never gives in. And then also, she's wrestling with her own inner tigerfish. She's quite rebellious. She does run away from home during the book. So that's why I called it that. It works on several different levels.
I think that it's really interesting that the title works in such a multifaceted way, especially because we don't often find that it's young girls at the center of stories. We're accustomed to the famous five, the secret seven, the Hardy Boys, and it's not often that it's a little girl at the forefront of things and in quite a dangerous situation as well, having run away from home. And with your audience choosing to write for this particular age group, why? Why this age group?
So I'm a mom, and I actually started it when my kids were this age. That's the most obvious reason. I wanted to write a chapter book set in Zambia, and I wanted to make it very readable for, ages 8 through 12, or maybe a little bit on the other side of that. Um, from what I understand now that it's in bookshelves across South Africa and Zambia and in the market, there are not that many options for this age group that are books
Yes.
that are set in different sub-Saharan countries. So I just want to share a quick story. I was
Yes, please.
in a I was in a bookstore. I live in Bryanston, it was a bookstore nearby. And I was watching a father and his son try to select a book from that age group. My book was not actually on the shelf yet, but I was just skulking around watching. So this child had the choice of books like, Wimpy Kid or things based on, fantasy or myths. And I really noticed there's a lack of books set on the continent that talk about local culture and just how wonderful it is to live in Africa. And so I was really looking forward to now with Willow Trading, my books will be on that shelf. And maybe the little boy will have more choices.
You raised such an important point that children in this age group actually don't have very much in terms of options. And if I look back, when you're just learning how to read, which usually for a lot of people is around the age of 5, 6, 7, there are all these little picture books, right? So maybe a sentence or two per page. And that's about it. You learn to read. And then perhaps this is reason as to why we see that there's a plummet that happens in terms of interest by children in terms of reading. Because as you've mentioned, there's not many books set for this age and also in this area. And when you're looking at this shortage, we're realizing that children want that representation as much as we as adults want it. And so I think it's really special that you've put forth a title that fills this gap, something that's, I think, a bit flexible. You could read it to your child when they are younger and not able to read for themselves, when they're at school and they first need to do things like book reviews, and little talks about books, this can come into play. But also, it sets the tone for their enjoyment in terms of reading. And as you said, seeing themselves and identifying in the location that it's set in. Now, have you noticed for yourself there to be a difference between the readers in Zambia and those in South Africa?
Oh, wow. So that's a question I can't even start to answer. But if I may, I'd like to actually answer a different question. Sorry,
Sure.
because out, I haven't done school visits, and I will do them, but I haven't done them yet. So I absolutely can't answer. I'm obviously not Zambian, so I did have a lot of questions for myself of what I have to write this book that's set in Zambia. And when I lived there for 10 years, one of my closest friends is a Zambian writer, and she writes really brilliant stories. And she sees another side of Zambia as somebody who was born and raised there.
Yeah.
And as an outsider, I felt like she and I were always arguing because I would say, "Oh, what about this, wonderful part of your culture? What about this wonderful river you get to visit and fish and you wake up and you hear chickens and I just saw so many things that I just wanted to reflect back. So
Mm.
even though I am not Zambian, I feel like as an outsider, I'm like a mirror to some of the wonderful parts of the culture. And I was also inspired by the movie Black Panther to write this book because I feel like that talks about the gifts from the continent and, just a more positive spin. So I felt that my take was valid because I have this outsider's perspective.
I think it's very valid, especially in the context of there's an expectation almost in the West that any book coming out of Africa or based on Africa is poverty and struggle and hardship. And yes, all of those factors are an unfortunate reality. However, there is so much more to Africa than simply the hardship. And I think that what you're trying to capture is the interpretation through your eyes as someone that has immersed themselves fully in the culture. And I think it's not appropriation, but rather cultural appreciation, which is also very important.
Yes, I like that term. I think I will borrow that. I should also mention some of the fun things that happen in the book.
Of course.
So, so Moati, we meet her. She is torturing her older brother, who she's 10 and her brother is 14. She has actually made up a note that his girlfriend has written, and so she's teasing him with that. Very soon after we find that she's gotten in trouble at school, she drank the paint water in art class just to shock her teachers. And she's hiding her homework in a drawer, which is definitely not anything my daughter ever did.
Of course not.
Um, and then, she gets in trouble, and that's when she decides she's had it, and she goes off to the village, and she falls into quicksand. She wakes up in a school, and everyone thinks she's an orphan, and she's just a terrible liar. And, people can see right through her lies. So that's just kind of the first third of the book, but just to give a sense of what's going to happen.
I think it's definitely an adventureful story, with the leading lady herself bringing all the drama. And that is something that I think many young women, regardless of their ethnicity, can identify with. That bit of fire within, that spark of mischief. And you've mentioned that your children feature in the book. Tell me a little more about that.
Okay. Well, of embarrassing them forever. So the main character Mwati is very much based on my very confident and strong-willed daughter who knows an answer. And then her older brother Chibs is very much based on my son, who's a little more dreamy, draws a lot of comics, is constantly tripping because he's not looking. So that essential dynamic was taken from real life. And then, of course, a lot of it is fictionalized. My daughter did not run away from home, just in case anyone's worried.
Thank you for clarifying that, and we're really glad that she did not run away from home. So, how does it feel now for you to hold a copy of your book in your hands and to know that it is in stores on those bookshelves? How does that feel for you as an author?
So wonderful, definitely. I will say that the journey has just been these just baby steps, one in front of the other, and just absolute like dogged perseverance. So when COVID happened, I was in Ethiopia, and all my paid work ended, and I decided to write and print a children's book there. And I had a lot of success with that just because I was part of the community. And so then I did a second one, and then Tigerfish is actually the third one that I have self-published. So I kind of got the hang of it. And now I've got another novel coming out that is going to be published by Catalyst. So each little baby step has led to the next one. And yeah, I'm really thrilled to be at this stage.
I think that is so phenomenal how you took the challenges of the pandemic, found them not just evolving your skills, but also I think a little bit of a metamorphosis in yourself and sharing that with the world around you. So Tigerfish is book number three. Number four is already in the pipeline. What else does the future
Mhm.
hold for Tej Rae?
So I am currently studying at University of Cape Town, which is really a delight. I'm doing a master's in creative writing. And so my thesis book will be set in Italy, and it takes place at a refugee center. So I like to write across genres. I've written young adult, I've written for children, I've written screenplays and TV pilots. I really like to challenge myself to try all kinds of things. So a lot of those works are in various stages of being finished.
That sounds absolutely amazing. I love how you've branched out into so many different directions of writing. And I must ask, if there were a young woman watching you, what advice would you give to her?
So I've done a lot of writing workshops, and I love working with aspiring writers of all ages. The first thing is just reading as wide as possible. I feel like that is what creates writers. And I like to tell people I write where the heat is. So anything that fascinates you or really has your full attention, that's what I when I sit down each morning, I really think about, what is it that I'm just dying to say right now? And so I try to stay in the most kind of dramatic, interesting parts of the story. And, nobody wants to read a boring story. So those would be my two bits of advice.
I absolutely love that. So, just to reiterate, it is read as widely as you can and write where the heat is. Tej Rae, I am so incredibly proud of you, the steps, the baby steps, and the books that have come with them. And I'm so excited to continue following your journey. And thank you so much for being here on the author interview.
Thank you. I appreciate it.